Today, I'm speaking with Dan Wise. Dan is the #1 federal prison consultant in the U.S. Right off the bat, you might be wondering, what is a federal prison consultant? Simply put, Dan prepares high-profile criminals for serious prison time. For example, a celebrity may get charged with tax evasion and sentenced to 12 months of prison time. They or their lawyer will call Dan's company to mentally and logistically prepare for prison. Preparation is wide-ranging, from questions like what not to do in prison to how to interact with other inmates or how to get sentence reductions, or more importantly, emotional conversations like how do you tell your children that you're going away for months or years at a time. Before starting his company, Dan was sentenced to prison time himself. His story is a roller coaster ride, and I thought that a conversation with somebody about a job that I didn't know existed might be interesting. I hope you agree. Finally, to thank you for checking out the new show, I'm giving away a PlayStation 5 to one of my viewers. All you have to do is like this video and subscribe to enter. That's it. Details in the comments. Now please welcome Dan Wise to the Welcome Home podcast.
I was working in a call center environment in Boca Raton, Florida. I had a credit restoration company, and I was sharing office space or renting office space from another company they were doing like magazine sales, magazine subscriptions. And the guys that own that company were talking about opening a doctor's office, a pain clinic. And they were talking about the enormous amounts of money that can be made with this. I didn't have a lot of knowledge of what a pain clinic was at that point. I was kind of naive to narcotics. The only real drug I knew about was marijuana. And of course, everybody's heard of cocaine and, other hardcore drugs. But my only experience with drugs had been marijuana to that point. So I had no idea the catastrophic effect of pain pills. So when they talked about opening this office and the type of money that could be made, immediately piqued my interest, as I wasn't really making a lot of money in the credit restoration business. I was lucky if I was making enough money to pay staff, pay some commissions, and maybe have a couple of bucks left over to make basic, my own payments, car payments and whatnot. So when I spoke to the owners on this, and they told me basically, if I wanted to come along, they could bring me in as an office manager, kind of overseeing the operation, as they were moving it to Savannah, Georgia, was where they were going to open up this operation. So from Boca Raton to Savannah, Georgia. And they told me the compensation would be $10,000 a month plus all of my expenses paid. So all of my living expenses would be paid in addition to receiving $10,000 a month. And they would also pay for me to maintain 2 households, one in South Florida, so I could go back and forth and see my children on the weekends, and a residency in Savannah, Georgia. It sounded great on paper. I was definitely desperate at the time, so I didn't ask a lot of questions. I had zero medical experience, so I thought it was a little odd that they're offering me a job as a office manager when I had no, medical experience in a doctor's office. However, they said, hey, we're going to have people there that know what they're doing. They're going to train you. We just need somebody that we can trust. That's not going to steal. That's not going to use the pills. That is able to manage people through communication. And they saw that's how I dealt on a day-to-day with my own staff and, in the call center world. So they thought I'd be a great fit. The problem is moved down there. Money never came. The most I think I ever made in a week was the last couple of weeks I was there. I think I made maybe $1,000 a week. So there was really no money to be made. And we were only open a couple of months before the feds came in and basically, kicked in doors, automatic weapons, the whole thing. There was plenty of writing on the wall. Shortly before they opened their doors, a couple of months prepping to go there, they said, hey, before we open up, we need you to start working, but we need you to do marketing. And I was like, okay, great. And my idea of marketing is like what? Facebook ads, Instagram, Twitter. What do you guys need me to do? And they're like, no. We need you to go to other pain clinics in like Jacksonville and Florida, because a lot of these people that are going to pain clinics are traveling from, northern states, from Kentucky and Ohio and New York and Connecticut. They're driving all the way through past Georgia to Florida to a lot of these pain clinics. So they wanted me to go to these pain clinics with my little team. It was me and a couple of guys with a van and walkie-talkies, where we would basically rent a hotel right next to these other pain clinics and these pain clinics were massive. They were seeing 150, 200 patients a day, big pain clinics. So they'd have me rent a hotel room where I could keep an eye on the pain clinic from up above. And then as we would see cars pull into the parking lot that were coming from out of state, we would wait till the cars were leaving. And then they'd have somebody would be up in the room watching with binoculars with a walkie-talkie and say, okay, this type of, Ford Chevy license plate so-and-so is exiting the building. So we'd chase them down, flag them off the road. And the people were terrified. They were thinking we're probably the police or something. And I already have the appearance of a police officer or military or some extent. So I'm jumping out of my car, running up to them, and they're just looking at me like, oh my God, they're thinking their life is over. And then I tell them, I'm like, hey, next time you want to go fill your prescription, instead of driving all the way to Florida, we're opening a brand new clinic in Savannah, Georgia, right off I-95. So it'll save you about a 6-hour drive. First visit's free. We'll give you a discount on the doctor visits. And we were to tell them the doctor is going to write very heavy prescriptions. So they had me doing that for the first couple of weeks, which was extremely crazy. Looking back, I can't believe that I did it. At the time, it was exhilarating. It was a lot of fun. It was like, kind of being a kid playing some kind of a weird game where you're chasing people down. But, there's a lot of danger involved. You're dealing with potential drug addicts that are very unstable, and you don't know what's going through their mind. So needless to say, the first day we opened the pain clinic, and I forgot what month we opened, we had a line outside from people that knew we were opening from us flagging these people down. So yeah, wow. From the get-go, it was a pretty sketchy operation.
As you're doing this, how illegal does it feel? Are you justifying because a doctor's involved, or this was happening a lot in the US? How are you feeling in terms of sketchiness?
Sketchiness, ethics aside, you can look at it as, was this ethical, unethical? Definitely had a very unethical vibe for sure, just the way that you're operating. But as far as legal, I did my research, because once I decided to take the job, I was looking into, what is a pain clinic? And you see all these news articles about, feds bust this place, overprescribing, or patients coming in the door without even having anything wrong with them, just basically giving the doctor money in return for drugs, kind of like a legalized or appearance of a legalized drug dealer. So that's what I did my research on. And I saw that we weren't doing that. Every patient that came in the door, regardless whether they were drug seeking or drug addicts, they all had verifiable paperwork, meaning they had an MRI that would show whatever their issues were. We would, let's say you came in and you had an MRI from Florida Imaging. We would have you sign a patient consent form, and then I would contact the imaging center where you got the MRI. I would fax them the consent form, and I would say, hey, did, Joe Smith get an MRI there? And is this the actual date when he got it, to make sure that it wasn't like photoshopped or somebody else's name on there? And then we would check, did anybody else request this same MRI recently, to verify, because something called doctor shopping, you can only get your prescription filled every 30 days, but some of these states don't communicate. So people are going all over the place, getting multiple prescriptions within the same month. So when we catch somebody that was doing that, we would immediately discharge them as a patient. So I thought that I was doing enough to not be breaking any laws. I thought worst case scenario, if shit ever went down, it would be on the doctor, or they might shut us down. Never crossed my mind that I could actually end up going to prison for this.
As a Canadian, aside from reading about pill mills or seeing the documentaries on Netflix, I'm not super familiar with the concept. What is the general business model of a pill mill? Was it, we're going to say yes to a lot of prescriptions and it was all about volume? What was the business model? How was this profitable?
So the way that first it's profitable just from the doctor visit alone. So you figure if you have, and the idea was to get up to like 100 patients a day coming in your door. So if you've got 100 patients a day coming to you from various parts of the country, needless to say, they're not all local. They're driving from everywhere. If you've got 100 patients a day coming and each patient is paying a doctor fee of $250 to $350, that math adds up real quick. But the real money that can be made is in Florida. They passed a law where you can't be the pharmacy dispensing the drugs out of the actual pain clinic itself. So you can't be the one to write the prescription and the one to fill the drugs. So they decided to move the operation to Georgia because Georgia hadn't passed any kind of ordinance or a law like that. So you could actually open your own pharmacy, dispense with the proper licensing, and then you could sell, you can charge whatever you want for these pills. And the pill markup, if somebody's paying with insurance, is pretty expensive, so you're making $250 to $300 on the visit. And then you got somebody coming in that you're writing, let's say you're giving them 3 prescriptions. You're giving them, Percocets, oxycodone, Xanax, whatever. And it's all narcotic, like Schedule 2 narcotic type drugs that people are using to get high on the street. They're crushing them, they're snorting them, they're potentially shooting them, but they have verifiable documentation. So it's like, do I think they're using it to get high? Probably. However, they've got documentation from other doctors saying, yes, they have, broken backs and messed up, their back is all out of whack and they've been in accidents. So they have severe issues, but they're also drug addicts. And when you write these prescriptions, each one of these prescriptions might contain anywhere from 60 to 120 pills per prescription. So you're writing, 3 prescriptions, and you might be making $3 to $5 per pill on top of that. And you've got somebody that you're potentially selling, 300 to 500 pills to at between $3 and $10 per profit on the pill. So, and then you multiply that times, your 100 patients that are coming in there a day, it becomes a $1 million a month plus income potentially based on what you're doing. So if you look into the numbers financially, you're basically becoming a legalized drug dealer, kind of hiding under the scope of the law to dispense your drug dealing business. It really is what it is.
Just on a moral level, as you were talking, I was thinking of the doctor specifically. I know you were an office manager, there was quote unquote marketing, but you think a doctor is like this super high standard where you've gone to school for a decade and it's about the patients. Did you ever wrestle with the idea of what type of doctor gets involved in something like this?
Yeah, especially once I got there. Once I was done with the marketing and actually I was only in the actual office for maybe 8 weeks before everything really, really went bad. And I remember I was just blown away that so many people were driving so far, I'm like, why aren't these people getting their prescriptions like at their own doctor? Why do they have to go to these types of doctors? Like I didn't understand it at first, but then I started seeing the type of people that were coming in. A lot of them would look very strung out. Some of them would have their kids with them in the car, and the kids looked like they hadn't had a bath, and they're not wearing shoes. It was just a really overall really grimy feeling. And I'm thinking to myself, what in the heck did I get myself into? And then you would see like a minivan pull up, or, a car, even just a regular car pull up, and you'd see like 15 people get out of this car. And one guy would come in and he would pay, he would have everybody's ID. He would pay everybody's doctor fee. So, you got 10 people, 15 people times 250. So he's paying that. And I'm thinking to myself, why is this guy paying for everybody? So I start, learning more about the business. And they have what's called sponsors, where this guy would basically round up all these people. He'd go get them MRIs. He would find people that are addicted to drugs, basically, and he would drive them to these pain clinics. He'd pay all their doctor visit fees. Then they'd go fill their prescriptions. And the deal is they would, in return, give this guy anywhere from like 50 to 75% of the pills.
Holy shit.
And then the patient would keep the rest for, their own addiction or whatever. And then the sponsor would go back to wherever, Kentucky, wherever he's from, because on the street level value of these pills, it might be worth $30, $40 per pill. So now he's turning around making thousands and thousands of dollars. It's just everything about the industry was super dirty. And the doctors, we had 2 doctors in our situation. The first doctor, his name was Dr. Asmat. And when I got there, he had just started. I think he'd only been there like maybe a day or 2. So when I got there, it was like day number 3. And I guess patients were calling, complaining to not to me, but calling to whoever they spoke to originally saying, hey, this doctor is not writing heavy enough prescriptions, or he wouldn't write me a prescription. He said there wasn't anything wrong with my MRI. And meanwhile, you got these people that are driving from Kentucky and Ohio, like, days away, and they're freaking out. So I get a phone call saying, hey, you need to go in and talk to the doctor and straighten him out. I'm like, what do you mean straighten him out? Well, patients are calling, they're complaining, they're not getting their prescriptions filled. They're going to, the word's going to spread that this doctor doesn't write heavy. I'm like, I don't even know what to say. So I knock on the doctor's door and he lets me in, and I'm like, hey, we've got patients calling and complaining. And I tried to tell him what they were saying. And man, this guy just snapped. He's like, you don't tell me, it's my DA license on the line, and I'm the one that's responsible if something goes wrong. If these people don't need the medication. And I'm like, hey, you're the doctor. So I called back and said, this is what he told me. Basically told me to go F myself, that he's the one writing the prescriptions, and I don't know what else I can tell this guy. So they fire him almost immediately. Wow. They fire him. So he wasn't even there a week, gets fired. They hire another doctor, this guy named Dr. Gossett, really nice doctor. I think Dr. Gossett had a small practice somewhere, kind of an older guy looking to retire. I don't know if he was naive to the situation or if he was just blinded by money, because they would pay the doctor, I think it was at that time, $3,500 a day out of the money that was coming in. So, everybody thinks about these money that doctors, unless you're like some big wig doctor with your own practice, and, to make $3,500 a day just for seeing patients, writing prescriptions, if you can somehow find a way to justify what you're doing in your mind, it's technically easy money, because they're paying this guy cash. Every day, at the end of every day, they've got me pulling money out of a safe. And I mean, look, red flags are going off. People are listening to this right now going, how did this guy not know? Like, what's wrong with Dan? What made him work there? And looking back, I asked myself the same question. I'm like, what the F was I thinking? But, I wasn't a drug addict. I wasn't strung out. I kind of got into the situation not really knowing what it was going to be like. Now I've moved from Florida to Georgia, and things are just like happening so fast. Before I knew it, it was over. Like one morning, it was just, knock on the door and boom, the cops are there. And, there's a whole story behind that. I don't know how much time you have, but if you want to hear that story, that's pretty wild too. Having the feds raid your house with automatic weapons is something that is what you only think happens in movies.
Let's dive right into that. I read that you were facing a potential life sentence? Let's talk about getting caught, how there was a raid, and what real prison time you're facing.
So there was two different raids that we were part of. The first raid happened in 2011. They decided to open another pain clinic, or they were buying another pain clinic, buying one out, I should say. So they wanted to open up this place in Atlanta. So they'd sent me to the Atlanta office, or Atlanta pain clinic, chop shop, whatever you want to call this place. It was nothing. It was not an office. There was nothing professional about it. A bunch of, glorified drug dealers running around is what we were. So they had me in Atlanta, Georgia, training the staff that was already there working at a pain clinic, had me training them the way we do things, like how we do our charts and just basically our scope of procedure. So I'm there maybe a week, living in a hotel directly across the street on Peachtree Avenue or something. I know there's probably a million peach trees in Atlanta, but on Peachtree Street. And every morning on my way to work, I would call Shelly, because as you've probably read, my girlfriend, fiance, and best friend also worked with me. They were at the Savannah location running things there. So every morning, me and Shelly would talk on the phone. Well, this particular morning, and I can't remember the date, but it was the day it all went down. This particular morning, she doesn't answer her phone. And I call my friend who worked there also, this kid, Constantine. He doesn't answer his phone. So I'm thinking, oh, that's weird. So then I get a call from Sean, one of the owners. And Sean's like, hey, have you heard from Shelly or Costa? Costa's Constantine, is Costa for short. And I was like, no. He's like, yeah, I can't get a hold of anybody and I can't log into the cameras. We had one of those like Wi-Fi camera where you could log in and see your, the operation from your phone. So I try to log into the cameras and nothing. So we're like, man, what the heck's going on? I'm never thinking in my mind, oh my God, something bad must have happened. I'm just thinking power out, they're dealing with something, and nothing bad is crossing my mind. So I decide to call the restaurant next door to the pain clinic that was in Savannah, Georgia. This place called Fatso's Burgers, which is no longer there as I just drove by. I called Fatso's Burgers and the guy, Tony, owns it. He answers the phone. And I'm like, hey, this is Dan from next door. And me and him had kind of become friends because I was constantly in there buying food as it was right next door. And he's like, oh my God, where are you? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, there's FBI agents everywhere and they're looking for you. And I'm like, for me? And my heart drops. I'm like, what do you mean? Why? He's like, I don't know, man, but they are guns out, dogs. They got cameras. They brought that Shelly was in handcuffs. They arrested Constantine. I'm like, oh my God, like I'm freaking out. I have no idea what to expect. So now I'm thinking worst case scenario, like, oh my God, like whatever happened is really bad. I have no money on me. And I'm thinking to myself, the company owes me so much money. I don't know how I'm going to get any money to even get back to Atlanta and get back to Savannah and get back to Florida. So I go in the safe and I take out like $3,000 out of the safe, figuring, all right, I'll take a couple of weeks paycheck to get back. So I go in the safe, get the money, get in my car. I'm in a rental car. I'm in a convertible Camaro, this bright yellow convertible Camaro. And I hear a tap on my window, like a knock on my window. And I look over, and it's just a regular guy, roll down my window. And he's like, Dan? And he looks at me like he knows me. I'm thinking, oh, this must be like a patient from before that maybe was in Savannah. And I'm like, yeah, as soon as I identified who I was, guns were drawn. These guys came out of like ninjas, like jumping out of trees and bushes, and they all had automatic weapons. You'd have thought I was, some kind of a Sicario drug dealer. I'm thinking to myself, whoa, I've never had this type of, never had guns or weapons pulled on me. So they get me out of the car, search the car. They find a little bit of marijuana in the car because was my thing. I like to smoke a little bit of bud here and there. And they find marijuana in the car, and I'm like, whatever. There's nothing wrong with marijuana in my suitcase. And then they go, we also found the pills that you threw on the ground. I'm like, no, I don't do pills. I don't have pills. You wouldn't have found any pills on the ground because I don't have pills. And they're like, no, we got the pills. We saw you throw them on the ground. So going back and forth with this, and I'm arguing. Now I'm getting like irate because I'm like, these motherfuckers, I don't know if I can curse on your show, but these guys have are setting me up. They're planting drugs on me. Finally, they're like, if you didn't drop those pills, how did they get there? And I'm thinking to myself, you're at a pain clinic. They're like, they had no idea where they were. They were sent from the feds, from the DEA's office in Savannah, Georgia. They were just called and said, hey, we need you to go get this guy. This is the location he's at. So they didn't know who I was, what it was about. They just knew they had an arrest warrant for me, but didn't know why. So I'm like, you're at a pain clinic. This is like a place where people come to get their prescriptions. That pill could have been one of a million people that came in and out of here. So ultimately they charged me with this effing pill. That's how they were able to because there wasn't enough weed on me to do it. I mean, it was like misdemeanor weed. It was enough for barely any personal use. So they charged me with this stupid pills, possession of Schedule II narcotics. And that's how they were able to arrest me on the spot with, a cause. So they arrested me. They brought me to an Atlanta jail. And it was actually really nice. It was probably one of the nicest jails, if jail can be nice. It was quiet. It was a private jail. However, it took so long for them to get me processed. We're talking like almost a day and a half. So I hadn't slept. So finally they bring me into this jail. They process me. They bring me in, whatever. They dress me out and I go upstairs and I'm laying down in my bunk and they call rec time. So where you can go outside of your cell. And these are like the jail cells that you see on TV, like where it's like the big door slam behind you. And, you're in this little tiny room with a toilet, a sink, and like a little window that you can barely see out of where you can't even see anything except, barbed wire. So that's the kind of room I was in. So they let me out to go through this little rec where I could kind of go watch the prison TV where it's, you can't really even see what's on TV because the reception's so bad. They have these rubber couches because I guess in case somebody, throws up or pees themselves or goes crazy, they can just wipe it down. So I lay on the couch and all of a sudden, before I know it, I passed out cold. Next thing I hear all this craziness going on, and I hear a sound that sounds like a gunshot, and I hear "get down" over the speaker, and it wakes me up, and I stand up. As soon as I stood up, I heard 2 rounds fired, pop, pop, and I got hit in the neck, and I got hit in the torso, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I just got shot. Like it felt like, I can't imagine what a gunshot feels like, but that's what it felt like. And I got shot by rubber bullets. The goon squad, I guess a fight broke out while I was sleeping, and the goon squad's got these big doors that are about 15 feet up in the air that come through kind of the ceiling where they can get down at you, but you can't get to them. So they can kind of, watch you from above. And when they say get down, anybody that's standing at that point is being obedient, so they fire rounds at you. So I just stood up out of like a daze, and took one in the neck, one in the torso. My girlfriend came to see me that same day at a visitation, and when she saw me, she thought that I got like beaten or raped, because I mean the black and blue had like spread to my jaw and through my collarbone, and it was a brutal experience, man. And then they transferred me to Savannah, Georgia, and that was a 14-hour drive in the back of a cop car with 3 people squished in the back seat, where we're handcuffed to your ankles, to your ankles are handcuffed to your waist, and then your hands are handcuffed to your waist, so you can't really move. And I was so sweating. I was in the middle of these 2 bigger guys. And I could just feel sweat beating down my nose, and I couldn't wipe it. I couldn't scratch it. It was the worst drive ever, because they didn't stop other than for let us eat a bag lunch and to go pee twice. The rest of the time, you're just sitting in this uncomfortable rubber police car, plastic seats. So yeah, it was quite the experience, my man.
During this insane experience, do you even know what you're being charged with? What's going on in your head? You don't know what's going on the outside. You don't have a lawyer. You're not being questioned. What is it like to not know what the heck is going on?
The only idea I had of what was going on is the part I forgot to tell you is right before I got back in the car to try to leave, or I got the money out of the safe. When we couldn't get a hold of anybody, I walked over to a little restaurant right next door to get a sandwich, to eat something. And I was calling. Finally, Shelly answers her phone, and she sounds really weird. She's like, hello, where are you? And I'm like, what do you mean? I was like, where are you? And she's like, acting really strange. And all of a sudden I hear her go, I can't do this. They had her on her phone trying to set me up to figure out where I was. And finally the agent, the D agent, his name was Doug Kahn, gets on the phone, and he's real, hey man, hey bud, this and that. Where are you at? We need to talk to you. Like everything's cool, right? And I'm like, oh my, well, what's going on? He's like, we just need to interview you. I was like, well, I can be there tomorrow. And he's like, all right, well, where are you at now? I'm like, I'm at the other pain clinic. I can be there tomorrow. He's like, oh, okay. So I go back in the office. That's when I get the money out to go drive back. And he wasn't going to wait for me to drive there. I think he was afraid that I was going to run or something. And that's how, so I had an idea. I knew now Shelly was in the custody of the DEA. But I still had no idea of like, what in the heck did we do wrong? Other than, did the doctor do something? I'm thinking to myself, we didn't do anything. There's no way this could fall back on us. So yeah, I was pretty naive to the fact, other than they just charged me with, I don't know if I remember, it was 1 pill or 2 pills that they said they found on the ground next to my car. But other than that, I had no idea what charges they had on me.
So at what point do you find out exactly what the charges are? You get a lawyer, you're looking at what you're up against, what they're offering you, or what's worst case scenario. Walk me through once you're getting close to that court date, when it's getting real.
Yeah, so I didn't know any of this while I was at Atlanta, because Atlanta only had me on the charges of the possession charge. So I bonded out on those charges, which that was a whole nother 1.5 year battle of me driving back and forth to Atlanta to deal with that court case, which was a state. And then when I got to Savannah, when they finally brought me to Savannah, that's when I saw the charges. It was the feds had, well, at this point, the feds hadn't charged us with anything yet other than the original arrest, but they hadn't indicted us on anything yet. So they basically said, okay, you're free to go, but we're going to be reaching out to you. And this is when they started interviewing us. And the Fed said, hey, we want you to come in. We want to tell you what's going on. None of us had attorneys at this point. So me, Shelly, and Costa, we all drove down to the Chatham County Narcotics DEA division, their office where the feds have their federal building there in Savannah. And this is when they told us, they were like, hey, it's like 52 counts of conspiracy to distribute oxycodone and Percocets. Basically, every single prescription both doctors ever wrote Dr. Asmat and Dr. Gossett, every prescription they wrote for whatever amount of pills, they were charging us all with that same amount of pill count, saying we knew that this was an illegitimate operation, and we conspired to work with this doctor. So they were charging us all with that amount of pills. So for the couple of months we were open, we weren't seeing hundreds of patients a day. We were seeing, 10, 15 patients a day, but still 10, 15 times, call it 200 pills a day times, 3 months. So we're talking a pretty significant pill count. We never got our pedigree license to dispense, thank God. So we didn't have any pills on site, but that pill count was high enough to where the guideline range for those pills, if you were to go to trial and lose, man, it was, if anybody's paying attention, if you go look up federal sentencing guideline tables, and I don't know if you're going to edit this video later, but you can always throw in a copy of the federal sentencing guideline chart. And my base offense level at this point was a 38, I think. Level 38, criminal category 0, which means I have no criminal history, but my base offense level was a 38. And if you look across that table, what a 38 carries, it was something like 280 months, or I can't remember exactly, 360 months to life, potentially, if you're found guilty. And then of course, from there, they start offering you plea deals and stuff, but they didn't offer us a plea deal for a long time. And we fought this from 2011 until the end of 2013, just living in pure, I didn't even know what the word is, like Twilight Zone, man. You don't know what's coming next. They hadn't indicted us yet, so we keep thinking maybe they just won't indict us. Maybe they won't indict us. Shelly and I had moved back to Florida, Costa 2. We went back to Florida. A friend of mine and myself, he had this really wealthy man behind him, an investor. So we started a completely legit call center. We were helping people modify mortgages and student loans and auto warranties. It was still call center industry, but we were above water. We were paying our taxes. And this went on for 2 years. I hadn't really heard anything from the feds. I'm thinking this is all behind me. Me and Shelly are living in our little townhouse in West Palm. She went and did her cosmetology license. She's cutting hair. I'm doing this. Things are going pretty good for once. We've got some money put away, and all of a sudden, the end of 2013, I hear my gate in my townhouse. I hear my privacy gate rattle, and I thought it was my cat, because my cat will jump up and over the gate, but the rattle seemed a little bit more aggressive. So I got up, and I live in a 2-story townhouse, and I walked to the balcony of my townhouse, and I look down towards the door. And as I'm looking down towards the door, I hear a knock. And when I see the guy lean back behind the balcony, he looks up at me, and I can see DEA jacket. And then he sees me. All of a sudden, door opens, and they yell, DEA coming in. And then I see just multiple guys coming around the fence. All I see is tops of heads coming by the fence, and they're all just running in. Again, automatic weapons. Shelly's in the shower, getting ready for work. I come flying down the stairs in my boxers because my dog, my little chihuahua, hears the door, so he runs out to the landing on the stairs. And they've got guns pointed at my dog, and they're yelling, Shelly Morford, we have a warrant. And I'm thinking, oh my God, they're here for Shelly. Shelly's name has never been brought up. They never arrested her other than day one. But she was never questioned after that. There was no indictments for her, nothing. So I'm thinking, oh, maybe it's for nothing serious. Maybe she did something stupid back in the day, and they're here for, I'm kind of feeling a little bit relieved. And then they see me, they got guns on me. They're like, what's your name? I tell them my name, Daniel Wise. And that's it. They were like, we got a warrant for you out of Savannah, Georgia. They threw me in handcuffs, put me on the chair. Female went upstairs and got Shelly. Shelly had never been in trouble, never had handcuffs on her, never been in a cop car, never had a speeding ticket. They bring her down the stairs. Some female brings her down. They got her dressed, and she walks by, and with the most gangster voice I could ever imagine coming out of my little girlfriend, Shelly. She's like, don't say a fucking word to these pigs. And she walks by, and they take her outside. They keep us separated. And that's when we officially got charged for 52 count indictment. And they'd offered me a plea deal prior to that, where I could do what's called pleading to information without ever getting indicted. They're like, we'll bypass arresting you. We won't indict you. We want you to plead to information, 1 count of conspiracy. And that 1 count of conspiracy, if you plead guilty to it, carries a maximum of 5 years. That's the worst case you can get. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm not going to prison for 5 minutes. I was like, I don't want to take this deal. They gave me an appointed attorney. not a public defender, but in the Fed side, you have what's called federal defenders, which are pretty good attorneys normally. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, they're offering me this plea deal because I can't afford an attorney. This is kind of like you get what you pay for type of deal. So after fighting back and forth, telling him no, 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 and he's like, look, it's not going to get any better than this. Like if you go to trial, you're going to lose, and this is what you're looking at. And I'm still in denial. I'm like, but I didn't do anything wrong. It's the doctor. So I wouldn't take the plea deal. I fired the attorney and scrounged up, came up with about almost 40 grand and hired a private attorney thinking, this guy's going to come in on this white horse and his sword and slay the dragon, slay the beast. And man, we fight it for another year. And ultimately he's like, we got a good shot. And it goes from that to everybody else took a plea. There's no one left. And it's you and the doctors and Shelley. So we either have to beg for a plea or you're going to go to trial. And if you go to trial, everybody on your case that took a plea deal is going to testify against you saying you knew that this was an illegitimate operation. So basically everybody was going to have to testify against me. He convinced me. I ended up flying back to Georgia, begging them to give me the plea deal. And they ended up ultimately offering me the same exact plea deal that I could have taken without spending $40,000 and without dealing with all the headaches 2 years earlier. And I took the same plea where it was a cap of 60 months was the worst case scenario. And then ultimately, as you know, I got sentenced to 42 months.
Is it safe to say that the entire system is set up for you to take a plea deal that they absolutely hate the idea of going to court?
Yes, not that they hate to go to court, but, and again, this is not, look, what I did was wrong. First off, let me say that anybody's listening right now, full accountability. However, the federal, I don't know other countries and how their judicial systems work, but in the feds, in the good old United States of America, the feds penalize you if you exercise your rights. Basically it's like, look, you're saying I did this and this is the time that I'm looking at, but you're telling me if I forego all of that and just say, yeah, I did it and don't fight you, you'll give me a much lighter sentence versus what I would get if I wanted you to really prove it to me. Cause I can tell you at the end of the day, I still don't think there was a law that we broke. Meaning, now maybe the doctor had some kind of responsibility that a fiduciary responsibility that he forego. But as far as employees working there, the law said somebody's coming in for pain narcotics has to have a valid MRI that validates the prescriptions they're seeking. They all had valid MRIs. They all had on paper legitimate reasons. If these people were drug addicts, it's not my job to question are you addicted to these? If you are, maybe you should go get some help, but you also have bulging discs. So who am I to say you're not really in pain? The end of the day, I still don't think there was an actual law that was broken. And that's not me not taking responsibility because I've seen what other pain clinics have done and they literally they don't even need to see MRIs. They're like, give us money, we'll give you prescriptions. We turned away probably 20% of our patients because we didn't think there was something bad enough or their MRI didn't really show any cause for these types of drugs. And these people would get extremely mad. We would discharge them. We would even send the discharge list to the feds so they would see that these patients are out there doctor shopping. So we really thought we were doing, at least I thought I was doing what I could do to not seem like all these other companies. But in the eyes of the law, if I would have fought it, the jury would have eaten me up and everybody took a plea on our case except for the one doctor. So I told you there was the two doctors, the one that was only there for a couple of days, Dr. Asmat, and then Dr. Gossett came in and he was there for the duration. Well, Dr. Asmat was like, I'm not taking a plea deal. I was in this place for 3 days. Y'all fired me because I wouldn't write heavy enough prescriptions. So he was like, fuck you, government. I'm going to trial. And they ate him up at trial. He ended up getting an 11-year sentence.
No.
Yeah. And he was only there a couple days. They were calling him at trial, the prosecutor. This is how grimy and dirty it was. I don't know if they could get away with this in today's temperature, but his name was Dr. Asmat. They were calling him Dr. Hazmat. So if, hazmat suits, they basically were just, this guy had no shot. And everybody that took a plea deal, we were forced to testify at trial. They wanted me to testify and say that I knew that what the doctor was doing, that the doctor had ill intent. And I couldn't say that because I truly didn't know that. The only thing I could say was The whole operation appeared to be a justification. We were using the slight of the law to pass off as glorified drug dealers hiding behind the law. But really, what doctor is going to take a job where he's getting $3,500 a day cash and he's only writing pain pill prescriptions? It's not like we were doing blood workups and physical therapy. It was 99.999.9% Schedule II narcotics. And it was very clear what these people were seeking from where they were driving from. So, that's what I have to tell myself now to, ultimately I contributed to drugs getting out on the street, beyond just for, your pain thresholds. These drugs were getting into the hands of families and, who knows, these parents that were overdosing, that weren't taking care of their children or getting in car accidents. And it could have been so much worse. If any of these people would have gotten their prescriptions, went and got high and got in a car and killed somebody, and the family came back and sued us, we could have had, there could have been murder charges on there, which I've seen other doctors get charged with murder for patients overdosing on the prescriptions so it really could have been far worse. And I have to now, atone for what I've done and realize that I contributed to the outbreak of the pandemic with prescription pills.
So you're facing this pretty lengthy sentence. You've never been to prison before. What's running through your head before you go there?
So I was out this entire time. Obviously, I was on what's called pretrial supervision, where you basically have you report to a probation officer every month, whether it's in person, they come to your house once in a while, you call them up, you got to do random drug tests, you can't travel out of the state. You're basically like on lockdown. They want to know where you are awaiting sentencing. So I was out this entire time doing this. And I went to my sentencing. So Shelly got sentenced first. Shelly got sentenced about 60 days before me. I want to say it was August of 2014. Shelly got sentenced. Everybody on our case, including attorneys, we all thought Shelly was getting probation. Shelly was the low man on the totem pole. She was the receptionist that answered phones. And everybody else got charged with conspiracy. Shelly was the only one that got charged with what's called misprison of a felony, which is like when they can't find anything to charge you with, they'll try misprison of a felony because it's the most bullshit charge they have. And it's like a very minor charge. And she wasn't facing much time. Her counts were far less than the rest of us. So we thought she was going to get probation. So I go to her sentencing in August. We drive back to Savannah, Georgia. Me and her mom go to sentencing. And the judge hands her down a sentence. I think the worst she was looking at was like 30 months. And the judge gave her 13 months. And when the judge gave Shelly 13 months, and we knew how little she had to do with the whole thing, it rippled through all of us. Because we were all thinking probation's an opportunity here. None of us really none of us thought what we did deserved prison, at least at that point. And we were like, oh my God, we are so fucked. If they just gave Shelly 13 months, the rest of us are going to get the hammer dropped. And now I'm thinking, God, I signed a plea deal, because I'm thinking, all right, I'm definitely getting 60 months because that's the most they could give me under my plea deal. So I go to sentencing. It's probably June, July, August, maybe the end of August. I go to sentencing. And the judge, basically tells me, he goes, this is the most heinous crime I had ever seen. That's how he kind of started off his statement. And in my mind, I'm showing, I got my poker face on. I'm not showing him like I didn't roll my eyes, but in my mind, I'm like, are you kidding me? I did my research on you. You've sentenced people to death, so clearly this can't be the worst crime you've ever seen, because you're not going to kill me over this. And he downward departed. My cap was 60 months. U.S. probation recommended 48 months, and he downward departed to 42 months. And when he handed me that 42-month sentence, and I thought they were going to remand me right there, because my attorney said, there's a good chance they'll remand you at sentencing, or they may let you stay out until your surrender date, which my surrender date was September 23rd. But the time you get sentenced, it takes about 3 weeks, because the court sends your paperwork off to the Bureau of Prisons, and the Bureau of Prisons decides where you're going to go. It's not up to the judge. The judge can't say, I'm going to send you to this prison. All the judge can do is sentence you to a length of time, and then it's up to the Bureau of Prisons to designate you based on, your crime, your custody level, your age, all that shit. So they leave me out. He's like, I order you to self-surrender to the Bureau of Prisons no later than September 23rd on whatever time. So a few weeks later, I get a letter in the mail from the U.S. Marshals, and it says, you are to self-surrender on September 23rd to federal prison Coleman Federal Prison, which is in Central Florida. And Shelly ended up going to the same prison. She went to the camp at Coleman. I went to the low security at Coleman. So I had already been there because I drove Shelly. She went in before me. I drove her to self-surrender her into prison, which was a very surreal drive. You know, we're sitting here driving to prison. We know that I have a 42-month sentence. We know that she's got 13 months. And in our minds, we're thinking, are we ever going to see each other again? Like what happens after this? You're going to obviously get out before me, 13 months, 42 months. There's going to be quite a bit of distance between you getting out and me getting out. At least this is what we were thinking. So driving her down, we stop and get a little bit of food, and we get there about an hour and a half early, and Shelly's freaking out. So we go find this little hole-in-the-wall dive bar in this little city, Coleman, and we go to this little bar, and Shelly's drinking vodkas and sodas or something, Tito's and sodas. She pounds back like 3 or 4 of them. I basically bring her to jail drunk because she's got this crazy buzz. They were real nice at the gate, brought her up to the camp. They let me give her a hug, and that was it. She off she goes, you know. And then of course she's calling me, talking by phone, waiting for me to self-surrender and going through the whole thing. I'm just sitting here going, I can't believe this. I'm freaking out because I saw where I was going to go. I saw where she was at the camp. There's no fence. I could see people. Like I could literally could have walked into the prison if I had. Oh, wow. That's how loose it was. Where I was going on the other side at the low, it looked like what you see on TV. It had the barbed wire and the towers, and it just looked like something out of the scary movie. So now I'm way more fucking freaked out than I initially was about prison. My only understanding of prison is what I've ever seen on TV, you know, the Oz and Locked Up Abroad and shanks and beatings and extortion. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm not a big guy. You know, I'm 5'10", 240 pounds. I just got done having a nasty surgery on my arm. I had no use of my arm. So I'm like, all right. Started putting on weight, like fat weight, just looking sloppy. I grew out this big grizzly beard, thinking to myself, if I look gross and smelly, no one's going to want to rape me. Just going through all these mental roadblocks in my head. And 3 days before I turned myself in, I don't know why, but I made a video and I posted it on YouTube, and I just titled it, I'm going to federal prison, or self-surrendering to federal prison, or something along those lines. And I just posted a video of me talking to the camera about what I did, not from an accountability standard, more of a, this isn't fair kind of, you know, I wasn't really taking accountability for what I did in this video. It was more of just like, I'm going to prison. I don't know what to expect, and had no idea what to expect. And my friends like that were going to drive me there just to drop me off. He's like, hey, you should make a statement when you go in there. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, do something crazy, do something they don't expect. I'm like what? So he comes up with this idea. September 23rd, Christmas or Halloween's right around the corner. We go to Party City. Party City is a store here. I don't know if you have them there in Canada, but it's basically like around Halloween time, these are the stores where you'd go and buy like your Halloween costumes and party supplies. So they have me buy this black and white prison costume, black and white pinstripes, the little hat, the number. So I put this on. The day I turned myself into prison, I decided to wear this costume into the prison. And I've got pictures you can have if you want to use it for this. I wear the costume in, and I'm at the door, trying to buzz in the main door to go into the prison to intake. And there's a perimeter guard driving around the perimeter in a pickup truck, the guy that carries a shotgun in case anybody tries to smuggle in contraband or someone tries to run away. He's the guy that's going to chase you down and kill you. And he rolls up and he's like, can I help you guys? And I'm standing there in this, you know, mocked up prison costume, which is nothing like the actual prison outfit. So I didn't look like an inmate there. I just looked like an idiot. And I was like, yeah, I'm here to self-surrender. And he just looks at me and says, you're going to go in there dressed like that? And at this point, I thought this is a really bad idea. But now my friend is standing there with his phone hidden, recording me. And I'm just like, I'm so committed right now. I'm like, yeah. And I'd done Molly the night before, which I'd never done before. So anybody that's ever done Molly will tell you it's great when you're on it, but the next day you want to jump off of a cliff because, you know, all your serotonin's gone and you're sad and depressed. So I'm sitting here self-surrendering to prison, all mollied out and depressed. And he's like, all right, good luck, man. So they buzz me in. I go in and I'm standing there. My friends come in the little intake area with me. Like, you're not in jail yet. You're just kind of like in the main intake area, the welcome center. And these 3 guys come walking up, giant guys. And they walk up, closer and closer to me. And then to me, it's like a Western movie in slow motion. I just see these three guys walking with the sun glaring behind them, slow motion. And I can hear keys jingling and I'm getting real nervous. And as they get up to me, I'm like, what should I do? My friends are recording me. So I make this asinine statement and I throw my hands out in front of me. I'm like, you got me, coppers. And like to handcuff me basically. These dudes snatched me up so fast, slammed me against the wall, and when I say he rips the clothes off me, it was like watching, I imagine, a movie where a female's getting ready to get raped and the guy just snatches the clothes off of her, like rips the soul out of her. And he comes right up behind me into my ear and whispers, and he's like, you think we're your fucking friends? And man, from there, it was just, I was like, this is a bad idea. And they bring me to a holding cell, like a drunk take, basically. They drug test me, Molly, whatever is in Molly, I don't know, cocaine or meth, whatever they use to mix in Molly, test in my system. Of course, I test positive for THC. So now they think I'm like some drug abusing drug addict that's going to go through withdrawal. So they put me in this weird other room called a fishbowl for a day. They're kind of keeping an eye on me. Then they call me to the lieutenant's office. 2 days later, I go into the lieutenant's office. I go to shake his hand. And he's like, I'm not shaking your fucking hand. And he like slaps my hand away. And he just asks me, he's like, are you a drug addict? Are you a user? Are you addicted to pills? And I'm like, no. And then he looks at me. He goes, if you're addicted to pills, he goes, are you a faggot? And I'm thinking to myself, this is the prison. This is the lieutenant of the prison talking to me right now. And I'm like, no. He's like, are you sure you're not a faggot? Because you'll suck dick for pills if you go through withdrawals. And I don't want you dying on my watch, faggot. And he's calling me all these names. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so terrified right now. So I guess I assured him that I wasn't going through withdrawals, and they send me back off into the compound. And that was really the last bad experience I had. Once they realized I wasn't crazy, it actually turned out like they were like, that was actually pretty fucking hilarious. We can't believe you had the balls to wear a prison costume in here. We thought for sure you had lost all of your marbles. So it was just the whole thing, man. It was just a wild ride from start to finish, including to this day.
On a personal note, before you go into prison, what is the conversation like with your family, whether it's your mom or your kids, if you have? How do you tell them that you're going away for years?
So no real family. Me and Shelly, both my parents my mom was in a nursing home, so she had no idea what was going on. My dad had passed. I have no real relationship with my brothers. They're way older than me. They live in other areas. So I have my kids, 2 daughters, one of my daughters lived with me at this time. I was divorced already, and my ex-wife she had just moved back to New York, and my younger daughter wanted to live with me. So my younger daughter came to live with me. And when I told them about this, I gave them a very, very decent heads up, like way before I knew I was going to prison. I told them what was going on. But what I didn't tell them was what I really did. I blamed it on the government's out to get me. They're saying I did things that I didn't do. I can't afford to fight it. This is what our system does. Really creating this picture of don't trust authority. And this is what I'm teaching to little kids, right? Like, how bad is that? Because in my mind, I could not own up to taking responsibility of imagining what my daughter is going to look at me as if I tell her, yeah, daddy's really not Superman. I'm just a big piece of shit who made some really bad choices. Now I'm going to leave you and your sister potentially for, at this point, I had no idea how much time I was looking at. I knew I was looking at, 20 years or more, because that's all you see on paper. Once you see that on paper, it's a very that number sticks with you. Even though your attorney's like, don't worry, we're going to work it down from there. You're still thinking, no, my life's over. I'm going to prison for 20 years. Like, you awfulize the worst of the worst. So I'm trying to prep my daughters for this. And I remember thinking back, and it's so sad to think about, because I was trying to, I was making my daughters feel bad for me, knowing that, I didn't this way. It's weird. It was a very selfish way for me to act. I never told them the truth until after prison, until after I came home, when I finally came clean with them. But the hardest thing in the world, because they didn't register at first. They were because they were little. They were 8 and call it 11, 12. So they were younger. And in their minds, they're like, hey, can't you just say you're sorry and, tell them you won't do it again? It's like, it doesn't work like that. And that's when I was painting this horrible picture. I was like, they're like, they didn't understand go to jail, because this went on for a couple of years. But then as it got closer and closer, I remember after I got sentenced, oh man, my daughter was still living with me, and she had to go back to New York. And if she finally broke down, and yeah, she just clung on and started crying and begging me not to go and just saying, please don't go. And you feel so helpless as a parent because you see, anybody that's gone through this knows, what you have done to your kids. You can't ever undo that. You can try to make things better in the future, but the moment that you crush their soul, because you were the person that's supposed to protect them, and now they're begging you to make them feel better and not leave them. And all I could do was push her away onto a plane and not know what was next because I didn't know how much time I was actually going to do. And it was, man, thoughts of suicide, running. I'm glad I didn't do any of that now looking back, because it definitely was one of the better experiences of my life going through all of this in the end. But at that moment, oh God, if I would have been a drug addict, like if I would have been somebody that was using drugs, I think I probably would have. There was a big part of me that says you probably would have taken your own life, because it was the darkest. Like when Shelly was gone, my kids were gone. I'm in this empty house by myself, and I'm packing up my belongings. I don't have money for storage. I don't have anything that I own anymore. People are coming over here. I'm going to prison, and they're coming over like they care. And then within seconds, they're like, hey, what are you going to do with this? Or what are you going to do with this TV? It was like fucking vultures come out of the woodwork, and you're just like, take it. It's like I'm watching all my stuff walk away from my house. And I remember when my dad died and I was packing up his house, I remember how surreal that felt, like I was packing up my dad's belongings. So when I was packing up my house for myself, it felt like I was packing up the belongings of a dead person. You have no idea what's next unless you've been through this before. The experience it's like this just dark tunnel. You don't know where you're going from here. You just know you're going to prison. And in your mind, at some point, every person, male or female, as a kid, young adult, older adult, when you run through fears, you think about, drowning or burning to death. Everybody's had the fear of going, God, it would be going to prison would probably be right up there with one of the worst things that could ever happen to somebody. So you have these really, really bad condensations of what you think prison is going to be like. And it sucks your soul right out of you, to where the only thing you can do is get drunk and start doing Molly. The night I did Molly was the best I'd felt in probably 2 years. And I wish I had found that sooner when I was going through that, because it was the only time it was the night before prison was the best night that I had. It was the absolute pre-trial experiences. People awaiting to go to prison is probably the real prison experience, unless, you're a child molester or, you're going to prison for life. But for first-time nonviolent white-collar individuals, the pre-trial experience, because that can last months and months or years of not knowing what's next, and that uncertainty will destroy your soul. And it's by far the worst part of the prison experience.
So that was part one of your story, and you've taken accountability, you serve your time. Part two is where you now consult and advise people going through what you went through, and you've turned it around and started a successful company and helped countless people. I would ask you, let's say I'm Jordan Belford from Wolf of Wall Street. I just got convicted, 3 years prison time. I've never seen the inside of a prison. I'm used to this high standard of life, and I give you a call. I say, I want you to walk me through this. What are the first questions you're asking or pieces of advice?
Yeah, so typically my calls that I'll get now, because as I told you, I made that first YouTube video before I went to prison. Never thought about the YouTube video in prison. And just real quick, because this kind of adds to the story how we get here. I did a program in prison called RDAP, like what my shirt says.
Yep.
RDAP is a residential drug abuse program. Because I smoked marijuana and drank alcohol on a regular basis, and I was open about that during my interview after I pled guilty, I qualified for a drug program in prison that if you successfully complete this 10-month program in prison, it can reduce your sentence by up to a year, take a year off of your sentence. So out of my 42 months, I did RDAP. Your good time, You only serve 85% first off on your sentence out the gate, unless you get in trouble. So take away my 6 months good time. That brings me from 42 to whatever, 30, whatever it is. Then a year off of that for taking RDAP. And then they approved me for 11 months federal halfway house, where I could do the last 11 months of my sentence in a halfway house near my home. And at this point, I changed my address to Washington State because Shelly had gone to Washington. So ultimately, I ended up only serving 13 months in prison out of my 42 months. Shelly was sentenced to 13 months and served 8. So the disparity in time of what we thought it was going to be was far less significant. So she was only out a few months before I got out. When I got to the halfway house, and first off, prison was not bad. I walked the track every day, got in shape, played games, sports, classes. There was no violence. It was a low security prison. I got mentally healthy, physically healthy, met some of the best people in the world. Anybody listening to this right now, the last thing you should be worried about is actually going to prison. So prison's not scary. You read a lot of books, take a lot of classes, exercise, make a lot of friends. It's actually like a vacation away from reality. It was a great mental excursion. So now jumping forward, I'm in the halfway house, which was far worse than prison itself, but that's another story. I'm in the halfway house and I check my email for the very first time. I get to this little shitty computer, the halfway houses, and I see YouTube comment, YouTube comment, YouTube comment. I'm like, what are these YouTube comments? I forgot that I even posted that video. There was no intent of being a prison consultant when I posted that video. So I'm reading all these comments and it's like, oh my God, I feel exactly the same way you do. I'm going through something similar. When you get out, if you see this, please tell us what it was like. So I'm living in the halfway house. I've got this little bullshit job that my friend gets me. My friend lives in Florida. He owns a company called Fit Food Fresh. And he's like, hey, I'm going to rent you an office in Washington so you can go to this office, work for me remotely, managing our sales team. And he goes, the cool thing is East Coast, West Coast time difference. He would have me start working at 7 a.m, my time, which, Florida already a few hours ahead, obviously. But then he would let me work until 6 p.m. East Coast time, which was 9 p.m. West Coast. So I'm working from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. every single day in my own little office. I've got my computer set up. It was great because I was out of the halfway house. So come 3 p.m. West Coast, I'm done for the day. Now I'm there because it's 6 p.m. East Coast, but I'm there for another 6 hours. So now I'm making response videos to that initial YouTube video. Instead of answering people, I'm like, I'm going to make videos back. And I start telling people what it was really like, what RDAP was like, what my prison experience was like, what I wish I had done different, what I wish I told my attorney. And then it went from just kind of getting traction to criminal defense attorneys started calling me saying, hey, is there any way we can hire you to work with our clients? The value you're offering is stuff that we just can't do because we didn't even know half this stuff existed. So it turned into like this little hobby where I'd get a couple, $50 here, $100 there. And it turned into like this full blown business operation where we ended up, LLCing and hiring staff and all this to where it is now. And now the common questions that people will call me up and they'll ask me, because they've already watched 500 of the videos that I've got out there. So they're no longer afraid of prison. Now they're like, hey, what can I do to reduce my sentence? Like your videos have created such a level of understanding and taken so much anxiety away. What can I do now that I'm not already doing? So, that's where we engage with them into the types of letters they're going to write to the judge, what type of programs they're getting involved in. Like if it's an attorney, because it's mostly white collar individuals that call us, attorneys, pharmacists, doctors, business owners. So like doctors and attorneys, we'll have them do like community involvement after they take their plea deal, where instead of just going to like a soup kitchen and handing out food, we'll get them engaged in their community where maybe we'll have to go back to the school where they went to school and they'll go speak to students on ethics about, hey, you're sitting in the same seat I was sitting in 15 years ago with the same mindset that I have where I want to go be a doctor, I want to go be an attorney and make this great life for myself. But here's the mistakes that I made and here's where I got greedy and turned a blind eye and here's how you can avoid these things. So now instead of doing basic community service where you're just handing out food, nobody knows why you're doing it, you're practicing humility, you're humbling yourself, you're taking responsibility, and you're potentially stopping somebody from making the same mistakes that you made. And we document all of this and it can go into your sentencing transcripts to the point where we're showing a judge information and track records of accountability that they've never seen before, to the point where it makes a difference from where, like in my case, even though my guidelines were X, I didn't have what's called a minimum mandatory. So if the judge wanted to, the judge could have gave me probation, but he didn't see it fitting the sentence because I hadn't shown any real remorse. I looked like every other first-time nonviolent criminal in front of the judge. I'm sorry, please don't. This is going to be really hard on my kids, my sick mother. It's this bullshit, self-sabotaging, boohoo, I'm the victim. And we don't let our clients go down that road. It's all about accountability. What could you have done differently? How do you illustrate this to a judge? How do you show a judge something different about you than what they've seen with every other person that looks and sounds just like you? So when we create this new dynamic and we involve them with a life coach that works with them and their family about what they can do right now to take accountability, what programs they're working on, the letters, everything, to the point where we see people end up not going to prison at all. Wow. And that's ultimately what everybody's goal is. But that's what they hire us for. And we work with them from the time of inception. And if they do go to prison, we work with them the entire time they're in prison with programs they can take to reduce their sentence from inside, advocate for extra halfway house or home confinement. So when people say, man, how are you charging somebody, $5 to 15 grand? You're just telling them how to survive in prison, like how not to get shanked. That's what they think. Everybody's seen the movie Get Hard. It's nothing like that. It's more of a mental preparedness, because until you've gone through this, you think your life is over and you have no value and you really don't know how to get out of that rut. So it's more of like a life coaching / mentor with the onslaught of how you can reduce a prison sentence by doing something that nobody else has done before.
I guess I never thought about the lawyers giving you a call. I thought it'd be the client, but in my own personal experience, whether it's a business or an entertainment lawyer, lawyers can be very somewhat cold and by the book, and they understand legal text, not necessarily what someone's going through. So it's very interesting where you can't really ask your lawyer these type of questions. You can't ask your lawyer what you tell your kid before you go to jail. You don't even ask your lawyer what is jail like, because they've never stepped one foot in a real prison like that. So it's interesting. What I found also really interesting is, aside from trying to get prison reduction, it sounds like you guys are real deal like self-development. You're trying to really impact the person first. And if that leads to a sentence reduction, that's a distant second.
Yeah, and that's what so obviously when somebody picks up the phone and calls me, what they want in that moment, their whole intention is, what can I do to get a shorter sentence? Now, if I just came out of the gate and said, all right, we're not really going to focus on that, we're going to focus on making you feel better, they would hang up and never call me back. So we have to disguise what our real procedure is and what our real goal is in order to get you to engage with us. We're going to work on your letters. Yes. We can help you get a shorter sentence, potentially. Yes. Blah, 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 blah. We go through all of that. Halfway through our program, most of our clients will come back and say to us, man, I'm so prepared to go to prison right now. Like, I hope I don't go, but if I do, I'm so much more at peace right now than I've been in since this has started. My communication with my family is better. I'm engaging them to ask questions. I'm because we'll ask somebody, we'll say, so tell me who your victims are in your crime. If it's a drug dealer, they'll say, the people on the streets that I got drugs. If it was tax evasion, they'll say, the IRS or the banks. If it was money laundering, the businesses or whatever. And it's like, well, what about your family? What about your kids? What about your mom? And you'll see them like stop for a minute. I'm like, you think your 8-year-old daughter is happy you're going to prison? Do you think this is making days at school any easier? Do you think your mother is super excited to go tell all her friends at, wherever she goes and hangs out that, oh yeah, her living her white collar life has now got to be embarrassed and ashamed of what you've done? Do you think this is something that your family wants to go through? Because you're not going through this by yourself. Anybody that cares about you is right alongside of you, watching you go through this with no idea how to help. It's like watching you die slowly of cancer. They hate it. It hurts them to see you go through this, but part of them can't wait for you to fucking drop dead because they don't know what they can do and they can't move on with their life because they don't even want to tell you, oh, I'm getting ready to go do this or I'm going on vacation. They don't want to rub it in your face. And when you make somebody connect with that statement, realizing that these are your victims, man, they take a whole different approach. And that's why when we do these reference letters, like when somebody says, all right, my friends and family, here's who's going to write my reference letters for me. usually they're going to go, oh, well, my dad knows a judge. The judge is going to write a letter. My dad knows a guy that was, a Navy corporal or whatever, and he's going to write a letter. It's like, well, why are these people writing letters? Do they know you? You think the judge is going to go, oh, your dad knows a judge, free pass? Or do you think there's a potential that judge could look at that and go, you're trying to use this influence to relate to me, and that could really work against you? So we advise all of our clients, stick to friends and family. And instead of just having them write a letter, we do a whole interview process with them. It's about a 45-minute interview. How do you know the person? What was it like when you found out? What does it make? Like, what are you thinking? Like, what could they have done different? Were there any red flags? And we'll get this person to really kind of get brutal and hold you accountable, especially when it's like a wife or a spouse or a child that's maybe 18 years old, to see how mad they really are and to watch what comes out when you allow them to open up. And then we'll segue that into, however, they've taken accountability. They're not blaming anybody. They're looking to use their time wisely if they do go to prison, not begging for probation. And it's showing the judge that you have people in your corner that are going to hold you accountable and tell you what you need to hear versus what a good guy he is. And when I was sick, he was always the guy that brought me, hot soup. The judge doesn't doubt you're a good person, but the fact is you're not going to prison because you brought soup to old people, or because you helped cats out of a tree. He's read that letter a million times. He's expecting that. And the first thing he's going to say, if you care so much about your kids and you're saying how hard this is going to be on your children, why weren't you thinking of that when you decided to commit your crime? So when we can get people wrapped around why we're going down this avenue, man, you'll see light bulbs go off and you'll see a whole new version of this person to where they have the best experiences throughout this entire process. And prison is no longer an issue for them. They've turned it in from a punishment to now going to look at this as an opportunity to experience something that not a lot of people get to experience, because you got two options. You're either going to cry about this or you're going to deal with it head on.
It's really interesting that you were talking about the family aspect. I recently spoke to Michael Scott Moore. He's an author that was kidnapped by Somali pirates for 2.5 years. And what he told me that kind of blew me away emotionally was his mom said she felt like a hostage during those 2.5 years. And over the time he was in captivity, she felt like her time was frozen for 2.5 years. And that almost relates to family or children during a prison sentence. It's almost like in some way they're in prison mentally.
You're 100% right. It's the same. This is really more relatable to many life stories such as that, what you just said. Prison just happens to be one of those real taboo subjects that people that have gone through it usually don't want to talk about it. Not because, what happened to them in prison. It's more of a, it's not acceptable in society to go, yeah, I was in prison. It's so taboo that they just want to pretend like it never happened. But I can tell you, 99% of the time, if I'm out anywhere in public, at a restaurant or out with friends, and we're talking about this, somebody with, big ears will hear the conversation and chime in and say, hey, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, and they relate immediately, either themselves or indirectly, or their friend or their mother or their somebody, their loved one is in prison, and they immediately relate. And it's almost like they're so happy they have somebody to talk to because they feel like there's nobody to talk to. That's why we create these, we have like a Facebook group. We do for the families, we do a family group. It's kind of like every Wednesday we have an hour where 10 people will log into a Zoom session and we'll talk about, what was so there'll be a focus will be on one of the individuals for that day. And, what struggle did you have this week and what did you use to overcome it? And then everybody will chime in and, give some feedback. And it's a way for like-minded individuals. Our whole motto has been communities, method, people helping people. So in order to make that reality is you have to find a way to put people together that are all experiencing something. And there's plenty of Facebook groups out there that have like family support for prisons, but 99% of it is just the prison's locked down again and they're mistreating him. And I can't believe they're not letting him make a phone call. It's all from this, like, everybody just wants to hear each other bitch and complain. So that's one of the rules is, look, the whole point of this is how can we find the positives in this? Is bad. It's really easy to find the negatives in prison, but what can you focus on? What positive is coming from this? And when you focus on that aspect of it, you stop being angry and you realize that as fucked up as a system is, There's people that have never been in handcuffs. There's people that don't know where the police station is. There's people that are never going to get arrested because they focus on consequences. So should I have gone to prison for what I did? Maybe, maybe not. But if I truly would have paid attention to what could happen to me if I go down this road, I put myself into the scope of the government. It wasn't the other way around. I made a conscious decision to do what I did, turning a blind eye. And when you can own that and take accountability for that and pay attention to your choices in the future, you don't have to become a product of your environment or a product of who you were. You really can change these things, but it takes practice. It takes constant paying attention to how easy it is to make a mistake.
I really love how you put that, because it is so easy and in many cases valid for you to say drugs should be legalized, or it was the doctor's fault, or what about the company or the family that created these drugs that are overprescribed. And you can make 1,000,001 comparisons. You can talk about private prisons, or there's 1,000,000 ways that you can justify it, but instead you're bringing it personal, you're bringing it to your household, you're caring about your family, your friends, and genuine self-improvement. One thing I really want to ask you was, you get so many calls from people that are asking for your help. What is the most common misconception someone calls you about before a prison sentence?
I would say the biggest thing that people are really, really afraid of is, honestly, people are afraid of where they're going to be sleeping, what the bathroom situations are like, the showers. There's something called a 5K1 in the federal system. 5K1 is when you cooperate, like when you basically tell on somebody. Most of my clients, I would say 90% of them, are either going to go to a camp, which is minimum of the minimum security, or they're going to go to a low, which is where I went. So in the feds, you have camp, low, medium, penitentiary, and then supermax, ADX, all that crazy shit you see on TV. Camps and lows are, I don't want to use the term club fed because it's still prison, but it's about as good as you're going to get. There's really not a level of violence there. So if you do have what's called a 5K1, which is in your paperwork, if you go to a high security prison, a medium or higher, when you get to the prison, they want to see your paperwork. They want to see what you're in for. Did you tell on anybody? They want to know, because if you did, you can't hang out with certain groups. You might get beat up. Like if you're a sex offender, they're going to want to see your paperwork. When you go to a camp or a low, there's no asking for your paperwork. Most people in there are 5K1. So my clients will call me and they'll go, oh my God, I have a 5K1 and now I'm seeing all the, because there's other prison channels out there, not like mine, but more of like entertainment prison, like after prison show, and kind of glorifying like the prison life and the violence. And they'll talk about getting smashed on the yard and people getting raped and extorted because he snitched on somebody. So they think that's where they're going. So they'll call me up freaking out because they've already cooperated. And they're like, my attorney told me that this couldn't happen. And I have to explain to them that does happen, but not where you're going. Where you're going, no one's even going to want to see your paperwork. So it takes a little bit of walking them off the edge, but that's probably their biggest concern is, are they going to be safe in prison?
So I wanted to wrap up by saying you are a clear success story of someone that went to prison, turned your life around, really care about self-development, your friends, your family, your community. How can someone listening who has a parent, a friend, a family member that has just gotten out of prison, how can a civilian or a family member or a supporter be a support system for somebody who just got out and you want to see them become a success story like you?
I would say change is a process. It's not an immediate event. If your family member or you want to see them change, it's going to take work. It's going to take consistency. It's going to take positivity. It's going to take reinforcement. January 1st, everybody gets a gym membership. Everybody's going to get in shape for the New Year's resolution. Come February 1st, the gym's back down to 20% population. You can't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to be different. It might start with that, but you got to realize that all the tools that you're learning right now, like what I learned in RDAP and being mindful and thinking about consequences, it's easy to do the right thing when everything going great. What do you do with these tools when your girlfriend breaks up with you, when you lose your job, when you get bad news, when somebody dies, you're in prison and your mom dies, how are you going to talk yourself down and use positivity? So it's going to take reading good books, Tony Robbins, reading the Bible, being open-minded, communicating. It's a process, man. It's not something that you're just going to do. You have to be willing to work for anything. Easy is probably never going to last. Getting complacent is not a good idea. Always challenge yourself. And if you find yourself feeling too comfortable, that means it's time to go to the next level and make it uncomfortable for yourself, because that's how you're prepared for a rainy day, is by staying somewhat uncomfortable in your situation by constantly challenging your beliefs. Don't use awfulizing statements like the prison just wants to lock everybody up. This isn't fair. Why are they locking down the yard? Why is the prison on lockdown because of COVID? Because it is, but where can you find the positive in that? So always look for the silver lining, and tell them to come watch my YouTube channel, because there's plenty of positivity on there.
Dan, your story is incredibly interesting. This was really, really fun, and I thank you for answering my call today. To celebrate the new podcast, I'm giving away a PlayStation 5 to one of my viewers. All you have to do is like and subscribe. That's it. Full details in the comments. Good luck.